Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. by recognizing the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga-Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nations are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. Last week, in celebration of Her Majesty's birthday, the municipality flew the Queen's Canadian Platinum Jubilee flag. This week, in recognition of Dig Safe Month, the municipality will be flying the Dig Safe flag to help remind people to call for utility identification before digging. We continue to stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. As part of that solidarity and as a welcoming and inclusive community, I highlight our unwavering support for the Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, and for democratically elected sovereign governments around the world. Brighton, our council, and our citizens are deeply concerned about the humanitarian toll that the ongoing conflict will take on the Ukraine and its citizens. And with that, we move into the meeting with a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Connect, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that Council approve the April 25th, 2022 Council agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed? Sorry, any opposed? The motion's carried. And members of council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. I have an indirect pecuniary interest in item 10.1, the notice of motion that deals with the Brighton Beacon, as my employer Maracle Inc. is the publisher of the Brighton Beacon. I make this declaration having sought the advice of the Integrity Commissioner. I am an employee of Maracle Incorporated, the publisher of the Brighton Beacon magazine. Although neither the Brighton Beacon nor Maracle Incorporated have a contract with the Municipality of Brighton, the municipality does from time to time make use of its services through advertising, as it does with other publishers. And to that extent, I am declaring an indirect interest in the matter and will turn the floor over to read the notice of motion into the record to the Deputy Mayor. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple. This past weekend on April 23rd, we fired up the COVID vaccination clinics in our area. Just so the public knows, there will be more coming. I'm not sure of the dates, but just keep checking the health unit sign. We're looking at having another one at ENSS, possibly over at the community center, and also going out to the North Fire Hall again. And the GO VAXX bus will be returning to Brighton as well. All right now, until they make a change, will be by appointment only. And also, if I could announce, on April 30th, the Belleville Senators reached out to me because I've done it in the past, their charity Chock-a-Puck, and they had nobody to do the last one of the year. So I've reached out to the council team and some staff members. So I'm pleased to let everybody know that the council team will be going down to the Belleville Senators game to raise some much needed funds. And they go usually to the charity that runs them, but I've agreed to give it back to the SENS Foundation, and they support the United Way, the Hospital Foundation, and many more. So the municipal team here, along with some staff members, if they don't mind me calling them out, Director Paul Walsh will be joining us, and the Deputy Fire Chief, and the Fire Chief will also be joining. So I look forward to everybody working together, and I think we have a good opportunity to raise anywhere from $400 to $4,500. So it'll be fun.
Nice, and thank you for organizing that, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, we wrapped up the Mayor's Challenge, the Mayor's Bash, or Trash Bash.
Keep the county clean.
Keep the county clean. I like Trash Bash better, but anyhow, the great volunteers, there was, I think, close to 500 that registered with the municipality to take part in Brighton. I know there's a lot of garbage, and the Public Works picked it all up this morning. That was great to them. And I had a great team in Smithfield, so Smithfield never looked so good. So also, that's about it. So I thank everybody for taking part in that.
Every year I've picked up trash at some point during the year, either during that week or there's often another week. And there's always an interesting piece of trash that ends up in my yellow bag. And this year it was a toilet seat. If you can imagine, I don't know who pitches a toilet seat out the window, but there you have it. Any other announcements this evening? Move to the adoption of the minutes, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council adopt the April 4th, 2022 council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council adopt the April 19th, 2022 planning meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. We have no statutory public meeting this evening. That takes us straight into delegations. Our first delegation, our only delegation, is Harpreet Ray, RV Anderson, presentation of technical review of the Brighton wastewater pollution control plant upgrades. Harpreet, are you there?
Yes, Mayor, I'm there.
Well, welcome to Brighton Council, and I'll turn the floor over to you for your presentation, but I'll ask if we can get his volume turned up a little bit. It's up.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can barely hear you, and the volume apparently is up as high as it's going to go. So if you could speak up, we'd appreciate it, Harpreet.
Okay, how about now?
Moderately better, yes.
Okay, I'll try to speak up as much as possible.
Thank you.
No problem. So good evening, everybody. My name is Harpreet Rai from RV Anderson Associates. And we were basically hired retained by the municipality to review, do a technical review on a memo that was done by GSS Engineering to upgrade the existing lagoon system, the wastewater lagoon system. So we generated a report based on that, this presentation is about that report, and I'm going to walk you through the key findings in that report. So I will share my screen with you. Can you see the screen?
We can.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay. So the objectives of this technical review, as I mentioned, Brighton had retained earlier GSS consultants who actually proposed an upgrade for the existing lagoon system to address some of the issues, compliance issues with the system, and they came up with a concept of the upgrade, and the key objectives of this technical review were to look at the preliminary design and process sizing suggested in those upgrades, and to check the overall technical viability of the concept to meet the treatment objectives. And I'll walk you through what are the some of the key issues that were basically ailing the system, and then we'll dig into what the upgrades were and our findings on those. So this is the table of contents of the review, the technical review of the memo by GSS that we generated. And this sort of shows the flow of this presentation as well. So starting with the project background, we basically looked at the existing treatment process and the influent flows and characteristics and the historic performance. And the idea of looking at all these things was that we wanted to properly define the problem before assessing the proposed solution. So this brought out some interesting things against which we could review the upgrade. So that was that, and then after that, we looked at the proposed upgrade, and the proposed upgrade, the way it was proposed, it was basically simulated into a model, and that model was run, and we saw how it operated under the design conditions, and saw if there are any deficiencies in the process, the proposed process and if there are more deficiencies or considerations that need to be carried in the concept. And finally, we came up with the key findings and the conclusion. So this is the way the presentation flows. So first of all, this is the existing wastewater treatment plant. As you can see, it essentially comprises of three components. There's an aerated cell, which first of all receives the raw sewage, which comes at the south end and flows this way, comes out at the north end, and then goes into this stabilization pond. So the majority of the treatment is basically being given by this aerated cell, and then some polishing provided by the stabilization lagoon or pond, which has these baffle curtains to avoid short circuiting. So it goes in a zigzag manner and gets out. And the constructed wetland that's supposed to provide a little bit further polishing to take out some nutrients and maybe provide some disinfection. At least that was the intent, but we figured that they're not really doing much in terms of removing a lot of nutrients. So this is a brief description of what these unit processes are. Aerated cell, this is a few mechanical aerators, and this is nothing but a flow-through pond, doesn't have anything mechanical. And these are constructed wetland, which are basically natural treatment systems as well. And then we looked at the historic operating data of the plant. And the first thing that we looked at is, at what percentage of its capacity the plant is operating, which seems to be well within its limit. The design rated capacity of the plant is 4,600 cubic meters per day, and it's operating at about 72% of its capacity right now, with the average day flows around 3,300 cubic meters a day. So capacity is not an issue. And looked at the peaking factor as well, which is during wet weather, how much in excess of the average flow is your flow, which was about three times as much. And for a plant of this size, that's pretty typical. There's nothing unusual about that. Sewage strength is average to medium based on industry standards. And there is something that we look at in terms of what's the maximum loads, contaminant loads that the plant sees compared to the average annual loads. And those were slightly higher than normal that we see. Normally they go up by about 30% of the average. In this case, they were about 50%. So it was important going forward to assess the performance of the plant, especially with the proposed upgrade, at max month loads, and that's what we did. And then affluent requirements, objectives and limits. And these are the numbers for different regulated parameters: CBOD, TSS, total ammonia, nitrogen, phosphorus, and E. coli. As you can see, different sets of numbers. Objectives are the numbers that we are obliged to meet, and they're not enforceable, while the limits are basically enforceable. And if you don't meet your limit, you're basically in non-compliance, and this is liable for penalties. But at the same time, the ministry's position these days is to always look for the objectives, and if not meeting the objectives, you have to do an explanation of why you're not meeting the objective. So the target is always to achieve objectives as opposed to the limits. But at the same time, as they're not enforceable, we can go above the objectives every once in a while, as long as we are trying to achieve those and remaining below limits. So now, looking at the key parameter that we were looking to address, which is total ammonia nitrogen. And this graph is basically stretching from January 18 to December 2021, so about 3 years of data. And these values in yellow and blue are the total ammonia and nitrogen numbers coming out of the aeration cell and the stabilization pond. And these orange and gray lines are the objectives and limits of total ammonia and nitrogen, respectively. So the orange line is the objective. And as you can see, this is seasonal. In summer, it's lower, and during winter months, it goes to a higher number because nitrification of the process of conversion of ammonia gets a little slower. So it goes for both limits and objectives. And one thing that immediately jumps at you is that from this is that there is very frequent exceedance of the objectives, and there's quite a few exceedances of the limits as well. So that's something very obvious right at the first sight. And then we dug a little deeper into this. We found there are some patterns in this which actually gave us some insight into what's happening in the system, and that sort of gave a context of what needs to be done and what may be lacking in the proposed upgrade. Um, although this was not in the scope, but in the interest of totality of the solution, we did look at some of the other parameters as well. And this is the graph for CBOD5 and TSS, and blue is BOD and orange is TSS. And these are the objectives. Objectives are 15 for both these contaminants. As you can see, there are quite a few exceedances of the objective of total suspended solids during the last 3 years. So that's can be seen as an indication of something amiss in the performance. So that's something and could be connected to the key contaminant of total ammonia and nitrogen that we were looking at. And likewise for E. coli, for disinfection, the system is designed without disinfection. With stabilization pond, it's supposed to meet the disinfection limits, but as you can see, the blue lines is the bars are the E. coli numbers coming out of the stabilization lagoon, and the orange bars are of the constructed wetland. And you can see there's quite a few exceedances, actually quite regular, of the exceedance of the limit and objective of 200 coliform forming units in 100 ml. So that's a concern as well. And as I mentioned, this is all related to the sort of the all these exceedances are related to this to the same issue with the plant, and that's what this this particular slide basically covers. So total ammonia, nitrogen, the first thing, as I mentioned, is very clearly it exceeds the TAN ammonia objectives and limits. And the trend that we saw was that inherently low nitrification in winter and spring. And the reason for that is that the temperatures drop during these months 2 to 10 degrees C, which are bad for nitrification or conversion for ammonia to nitrates. And then on top of that, during spring weather, the flows go high because of showers and the snow melt. So this becomes sort of a double whammy that the plant gets hit with a low retention time and low temperatures, both of which affect nitrification. So you see spikes, ammonia spikes coming out of the aerated cell. And then once this settles down towards late June, late spring and early summer, what happens is that flows start to settle down a little bit, but now the temperature starts going up. And then what that triggers is that because of inadequate mixing in the aerated cell, some of the settled solids in the aerated cell, they start bleeding ammonia. And then you recurringly see in all the years that during June and July, you'll see a further spike in ammonia. And then after that, once you see these spikes, and then what happens following these months from August to almost October, and sometimes stretches into November as well, the average temperatures are high, especially up to October, and the flows are low. So, and both of these conditions favor nitrification, and you'll see significant drop in ammonia levels coming out of the aerated cell, and it is typically less than 5. So very good performance during these months. But then something else happens, and why this basically happening in during this period is, as I mentioned, because of low flow, which gives the aerated cell the required amount of solids retention time. This is pretty much in the sweet spot for nitrification, 6 to 9 days, very adequate for nitrification, and the temperature is high, which helps as well. So you get enhanced nitrification activity and ammonia reduction during these months. But then, as I mentioned, something else happens in the stabilization pond. Unfortunately, the good work that we are able to do in the aerated cell is sort of nullified and basically brought to naught by the stabilization lagoons, because of the high temperature. Now the sludge settled in the stabilization pond starts bleeding ammonia, and then it starts generating its own ammonia nitrogen. And I'll walk you back to this, referring to these months. See this August and September and October, the yellow line is ammonia coming out of the aerated cell, and the blue line is coming out of the stabilization pond. Likewise, during these months, September, you can see a small yellow and a big blue line. So, and likewise, during these months, almost no ammonia here, but coming out of stabilization pond, it's exceeding objectives. So this is sort of a cyclic pattern that happens every year with the way the current system operates. So yeah, this is about the stabilization lagoon. How this is basically a commentary on if the stabilization pond is adding or contributing anything towards nitrification. The answer to that is no. And if anything, it actually adds to the ammonia during the summer months and basically nullifies the good work that's been done by the aerated cell. So that's a concern that needs to be worked into the solution to address this. So this is the proposed upgrade by GSS, and I'll just briefly, what this is that first of all, the mechanical aerators in the aerated cell are supposed to be replaced with what we call diffused aeration system. So this is fine and coarse bubble system. So the mechanical aerators will be replaced with blowers. So these 3 blowers sitting on the side of the lagoon, and the pipes with aeration diffusers. So this is well mixed and aerated all across. And then out of this, it will go through a screen before it gets into a secondary clarifier. And the basic concept is that when it goes to the secondary clarifier, the active biomass in the secondary clarifier will get settled and can be recycled back into the aerated cell. And with that, what we achieve is that despite high flows during spring months, you are able to retain the active biomass within the system. So that basically segregates the solids retention time from hydraulic retention time, and that gives treatment efficiency and capacity to the plant. So conceptually, a good concept, robust concept, with some fine tuning that needs to be done. That's been noted. And also the waste sludge which is generated, they also gave a concept of putting it into geotubes, dewatering it, and then hauling and disposing it in a suitable manner. This was not in our scope, but nonetheless, this is an important aspect of the overall solution. So we have given some commentary on that as well. And this is nothing but the the change in the process by this upgrade. This is the existing system in which the solids retention is equal to the hydraulic retention time, and this is limited to 3 to 4 days. And this is the limitation of the system because the flow goes right through the aeration cell. The biomass is not returned back to the aeration cell, so your process is pretty much dependent on the hydraulic retention of the lagoon. So that's what limits the treatment capacity of the system. And then if you have a secondary clarifier, then you have basically segregated or decoupled your SRT from hydraulic retention time, and now you can get into that sweet spot of HR solids retention time, 8 to 12 days or more for consistent nitrification. So these are the influent parameters that we put into the BioWin model to assess the performance with the proposed upgrades, and these match the max month loadings. As I mentioned, those are critical. Then we ran the model, basically saw all the parameters, if they are in line, everything, if anything is not meeting either the process requirements or the ministry guidelines, because both are important in terms of getting approval as well as making the process effective. And one of the things that we found was that based on the ministry guidelines, the amount of air proposed by the system is less than what is dictated by the ministry guidelines. Based on the ministry guidelines, it'll be little upwards of 14,000 cubic meters per hour, and the proposed capacity of the blower system is close to 9,000 cubic meters per hour. So this is a deficiency. Something that needs to be worked out, but there is some comments on that. It may need to be increased, or else the ministry will have to be shown that the proposed capacity is actually adequate for mixing. As you can see for the side, the affluent concentrations, this meets the requirement. So most of the proposed unit processes are within the guidelines and can generate the required affluent quality. So in conclusion, what we figured was that existing wastewater treatment plant had these three key issues. It has low solids retention time because it's a flow through system and you can't control that solids retention time. You are basically at the mercy of the flows. And then this low retention time gets worsened by high flows and low temperatures in winter and spring. And right now the plant is only operating at 70% of its capacity. And you can imagine as the flows go up, this will get worse. And then third thing which worsens this is that there's solid accumulation both in the aerated cell and the stabilization pond. So for the aerated cell needs to have a mixing system which doesn't allow the solids to settle. And the stabilization pond basically needs frequent removal of the solids from it. It needs to be worked into the solids management plan so that you don't have the ammonia bleedouts. With the proposed upgrades, you will get the SRT. You're no longer at the mercy of the flows. And the secondary clarifier will secure nitrification. This is a good, robust concept. Process sizing mostly seems to be adequate. They had also proposed a different, a variant of a conventional system, which was, instead of putting a secondary clarifier at the back end of the aerated cell, they had also proposed in their proposed upgrade to operate the aerated cell in a batch mode where you switch off the aeration intermittently and let the inflow push out the supernatant out so that you retain the solid that way. But that's something that is a very risky proposition, and SBRs are complicated operations, need to be fully automated, so we do not recommend that. So going forward with the proposed and the preferred system with the secondary clarifier, we also identified that the way the screening system is proposed after the aerated cell is not a good concept. This needs to go before the aerated cell. So you need to have a proper headwork facility before the aerated cell, because if you don't have a proper screening facility, you will basically block or foul the diffusers with rags and screenings, and that'll not only hurt the biology, but then it'll hurt the mixing, and then you'll get to square one with solid settling in the aerated cell, and we're back to the same problem once again. And then, as I mentioned, the mixing seems deficient. The way the amount of air that is proposed seems to be deficient based on the ministry guidelines. This guideline, however, is a little bit conservative, and there are guidelines in WEF, Water Environment Federation, which are significantly lower than this. So this is sort of a gray zone. So that's why we mentioned that if the supplier is confident that the proposed amount of air is adequate to provide the required mixing, then they need to show it via some sort of hydraulic modeling, and then it might be acceptable. But if not, then they need to meet the ministry guidelines. And then the secondary clarifier, although it has a sort of a protection in the stabilization pond, like if it gets hydraulically overloaded and spews out high amount of solids, they can still be captured by the stabilization pond before the effluent goes out. But the ministry may take a different position on this, and they might insist that the clarifier sizing needs to be based on the ministry guidelines, and based on ministry guidelines, it's slightly short. So while a case can be made about a smaller clarifier, increasing it a little bit won't add to the cost at this stage. So it's recommended that you make the secondary clarifier a little larger, make it meet the ministry guidelines, so the approval process is smoother. And then, as I mentioned, the solids removal in the aerated cell and stabilization lagoon is imperative for successful implementation of the project. So this is the first thing that needs to be done. There's a need to be a proper plan for this before any of the other upgrades are implemented. And then on an ongoing basis, proper sludge management facility needs to be a part of the solution. And this is basically some of the considerations that we had mentioned, apart from the deficiencies, actually including the deficiencies in the process. Headworks, as you mentioned, it needs to be upfront before the aerated cell. In the aerated cell, the proposal is installation of fine bubble aeration system and removal and disposal of accumulated sludge. And these are the considerations which I've already discussed. Secondary clarifier can be a little bigger to meet the ministry guidelines. Stabilization pond needs removal and disposal of the accumulated sludge, because if we don't do it, it basically defeats the purpose, and it's we're not making use of the upgrade effectively. And then sludge management needs to be an ongoing thing, and this is something that needs to be looked at. There can be different options, so those options need to be carefully studied based on their capital, operational costs, odor issues, and operational ease, and maintenance and the likes. So that is pretty much it. If you have any questions, most welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. Appreciate the presentation and the detailed information on your review. I saw our resident council expert nodding his head a lot, which pleased me, so that's good. But I'm sure he'll have some questions of clarification. I will open the floor to members of council for those questions if you have any. Councillor LeBlanc.
Hopefully it won't be a dry subject.
Your microphone's gone out.
I agree with you on quite a few points. I thank you very much for seeing some of the things that I've seen for a long time, but wasn't seen by other people and other consultants that were here. I really appreciate your knowledge. That I do.
Thank you.
On the, I might jump around here for you.
Yeah.
When we go to our flows, and you are right, when we have low flows and high temperatures, our ammonia spike inside our lagoon.
Yeah.
It causes our problem, but also that exceedances, if you look at the ratio and proportion between the yellow and the blue,
Mhm.
it goes through it wherever we have exceedances, where we have a yellow in our aeration chamber,
Yeah.
a longer blue, and it's coming from the lagoon system just as much.
Yeah. Yes.
And allow our solids, our suspended solids to go there,
Yes.
digest it, because you got tomophilic, monophilic, and tomophilic, which is your anaerobic digestion, right? We're at the lower end. We're at the
Right. Yeah.
sapophilic. We're at the
Yeah.
sapophilic end,
Mesophilic.
which gives us a lot of ammonia.
Yes.
Here, settle and just boil just like a septic tank.
Right. Yeah.
That's why it always had to be removed, and that's why Gosport for years and years complained about the smell and the odors that were coming out of there because they never removed the solids.
Yeah.
All right. When we go to your lagoon system, a lagoon system was built, our aeration pond and lagoon system was built for high BOD loadings for fruit because we processed a lot of fruit. So all they did was try to mix the air, and so they had lightning mixers that were only on the surface. You didn't get the full depth.
Hmm.
That's why you're going to go to a triple point, get low diffuse, high diffuse, and you have to go to a full automated system to control your dissolved oxygen and to control mixing.
Yes.
Your secondary clarifier, you said it's too small. The secondary clarifier can be adjusted by the weir, the veer knob weir. And yes, it should be designed to the flow that we want to go for our population.
Yeah.
We have a secondary plan that is going on now. And the information from that secondary plan should be fed to the consultant. So you design the secondary clarifier to meet the needs of the population and the growth.
Yes.
Let's go to the can twice. Let's go to it once and do it right once.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. When you come to the screening, you're 100% right. If you're an operator, you want the screening, the rags, everything, plastics and debris removed pre-aeration.
Yes.
Don't do it after aeration before it goes to your secondary clarifier. That was brought up in the wastewater task force meeting that we had. That was brought up there. That was there. When you come to your lagoon, when you get your operator, now your operator has a way of monitoring the activated sludge through your secondary clarifier.
Hmm.
If he's lacking oxygen, if he doesn't have enough, if he has too much, you're going to get pin flop, overflow, and sludge bulking.
Right.
So that'll all take part in your secondary clarifier.
Hmm.
Where you have a return pump, I feel you should have a splitter box. So the operator can do a percentage instead of having, unless you're going to have a variable speed pump to control the sludge, the activated sludge.
For the return?
For the return, back to the aeration pump.
Yeah, the one simple way of doing that is if you just put VFDs on the variable frequency drives on the return pumps,
Okay.
you can control it in a pretty wide range, and that's the norm these days.
Okay, it's beyond my times. I'm old school. I use splitter box, okay?
Yeah, they're pretty efficient.
Just to let you know that.
Yes.
Indulge me a little bit in this,
I-
because it's very serious for this town.
So far I am.
Okay,
Carry
it's
on.
very serious for this town. So the activated sludge in this process will not go to the lagoon again, correct?
Yes, correct.
And with having a return activated sludge line, we'll be able to control higher class protozoas in
Yes.
our creation chambers, right?
Correct.
Higher
Correct.
class
Yeah.
protophores and stuff that allow us to have a higher destruction of BOD5.
Yeah.
Then presently, the sampling that we're using now, we're at the lower class protozoas. So when you're putting a rate of 200 MDL, you could HRAX 380, 480 if you go to the higher class protozoas.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna be meeting those things with this system. I just want to make sure to be sure we're gonna be there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Indulge me, just
Yeah.
because I
Good
want to
point.
get this right.
Yeah.
Because I'm not gonna spend $12 million on another system that's too expensive. We'll do it.
Yeah.
Now, when you come to here, your secondary clarifier, we should make it a bit bigger. I agree with you to the new flow, but when you come to the aeration, most mechanical plants aeration system only have 12 to 16 hours of retention time. We have
Correct.
2.4 days.
Yeah.
So you, right? You understand me?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we got 2.4 days,
yeah.
which is unheard of.
Yeah, it's for lagoon systems. If you have a fully aerated lagoon systems, it is possible. The downside of this is, because this is retrofit. Either you do a separate concrete tank, then you can control the size of it. But if you're retrofitting, you're stuck with a big size. And the downside of this is that when you look at the aeration demands, you look at the demand of the biology and you look at the demand of mixing. In a smaller tank, in a mechanical plant, because your tank is small, your mixing demand is always lower than your biological demand. And in this case, your mixing demand actually way exceeds the biological demand, and you have to supply air based on the higher of the two. So in this case, your aeration demand will be dictated by mixing. So you'll be always running at a high DO because you are providing air for mixing, not just for biological demand. So that's the downside of this, and that's something that you mentioned in the
But
report.
even
Yes.
in the mechanical plants and the larger ones that I've worked in cities from Jamaica all the way down to help to go work in different countries, they all have a down cycle in a mechanical plant. They shut themselves off.
Yeah,
You have a low BOD, the low solid rate. This one, we got to have mixing, but that's
Yeah.
what you can pulse your mixers with your timers. And that's why you said that you must have adjusters for your blowers.
Unfortunately, that's something that that's not going to be the case in this, because regardless of what's coming in, even during low flow or low load periods, you will still need to keep the bugs mixed in the tank, and the requirement of air is way more than your biological demand. So you'll have to keep it aerated at the rate which is dictated by mixing. So that's one optimization aspect that you cannot get out of this system. Unfortunately, you will be stuck with this high air demand in the system.
So when you come to the ministry saying that we will not have enough air, that we're short,
Yes. Yeah.
with your argument, now we have more than sufficient air to meet our requirements for the ECA, because we're going to have to be mixing constantly.
Yes. Yeah. And the supplier needs to make sure. What we have commented is that based on the ministry guidelines, the mixing air seems inadequate. But there are other guidelines like WEF guidelines, which have a lower rate for mixing. So a case could be made, but supplier will have to convince the ministry. The onus is on the supplier on this, that they'll have to convince the ministry that this is adequate. And if not, then they have to upsize the aeration system.
Now, so we've got the return, we got the activated sludge out, that's going to be go. We're going to have control of our bacteria. Now, the nitrifiers that take care of our ammonia,
Yeah,
they have to stay in balance
correct.
because they're a clinger.
Yeah.
They have to have something to cling to remove the BOD, the ammonia. And you look at the ammonia with this process, we're going from 15 to 16 to
Yeah.
0.6
Mhm.
to 0.8.
Yes.
It'll be we won't be charged anymore because the operator has controls now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there was no controls before.
Yes. Correct.
That's exactly what I was saying before. There was
Yes.
no controls for the operator. Now we're giving them controls.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
The only shortfall that you see with this now is that we should make our secondary clarifier a bit larger. And I agree with you, take the grit and the trap removal and put it at the head.
Yeah.
Before it goes into the aeration and stop the sludge from going into the lagoon.
Correct. Yes.
Now, here's one I'm going to throw to you. The wetland that we have, those
Mhm.
2 lagoon cells, and knowing that stabilization pond is BOD loading per surface acre, has that changed?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
BOD
Councillor
loading,
LeBlanc, could you draw your microphone
Oh.
closer?
BOD loading,
Yeah.
the lagoon system is based per surface square acre.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if those cattails and everything that are dying, that are creating E. coli naturally, that are creating tannic acids and everything in those wetlands, if we dredge those out, and that would expand our polishing zones for our lagoons, would you look at that as a recommendation?
I would say, once this upgrade is implemented with almost your entire treatment happening inside of the aerated cell and the secondary clarifier, the polishing pond will sort of become redundant.
Tend to agree.
Yeah, you can basically get rid of that. If it is, if it is adding nutrients to the discharge from the stabilization pond, then might as well just get rid of it or take it out of the ECA at least.
The reason I'm saying this because our TDS, the TSS, goes up in the summer months
And that is only because
of the sludge is going into the pond.
Yeah, that's right. So those, and that it's been sitting there for a long time. Every spring there is inversion. The lower layers tend to come up, and there's some mixing, so the solids get kicked out. So once that lagoon the stabilization pond is dredged, it's clean now, and you're managing your solids properly, then it's basically a flow through lagoon for the treated effluent coming out of the front system, and then you don't have that problem. And then that stabilization pond is essentially giving you the polishing in terms of disinfection. It's taking care of your E. coli, and maybe it'll knock out some of the phosphorus and nitrates.
Thank you. I hope my limited knowledge asked the right questions to you.
It's not limited by any means.
What was that?
It is not limited by any means. Really impressive, yes.
No, but thank you very much for confirming this.
Yes.
But now we come to our high flows.
Councillor LeBlanc, how many questions?
One
questions?
more.
Okay, go
Is
ahead.
it? Now it comes to our high flows and our peak flows.
Yeah.
You may think that it was snow melt and rain.
Yeah.
Since you're not very knowledgeable with the Municipality of Brighton, I do believe that a majority of it is from houses that were built in wetlands or built into the groundwater and have sub pumps that are hooked up that are discharging to the sanitary sewer system.
Yep.
And because it coincides with the floods and the rains when these things take place.
Yeah.
So because we've done major infrastructure work on getting rid of all of infiltration, the majority of it, we're going to do more in harbor.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is coming from illegal sub pumps.
Right.
How do you stop that?
Well, that has to be enforced. That's more a political question than a technical. So that's basically, you have to have an infiltration study and basically find out the proverbial smoking guns in the system and basically block those. And this is a quite a prevalent problem that we see across the municipalities across Ontario. And the only way to sort this out is that the new development, you be more aware of how those connections are tied down to the existing system, and you don't allow that, and then look out for as I mentioned, the proverbial smoking guns, which are adding direct inflow into your collection system and basically take them out. That's the only way. Or otherwise you have to do very expensive CSO tanks or do large equalization tanks at your facility. So those are some of the things that you can do.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor Tadman.
Thank you, Mayor. Did I hear that we wouldn't necessarily be using the constructed wetland if we do all these new updates?
That was certainly alluded to, yes.
That's right.
That's correct. So just a little history here. That whole wetland was, well, I have aerial views of it many years ago, and that was wide open. We skated there, we swam there, the commercial fishermen fished there. You cannot do that now. And the yacht club has to dredge, get permission to dredge every 5 years. So I think it'd be excellent if this wasn't going in there. But the other thing that I've brought it up before, and I think we have to do something about it. It isn't the Anderson's problem, but I think we need to be aware that the phragmites, those big fluffy looking things that are growing, turn our wetlands into soil. And I don't know how we're going to get to that point where we're going to at least burn them off, because it's wrecking that wetland.
It sounds like dealing with the constructed wetland might be step two. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Go
Just
ahead.
follow up on that. So I would understand then that what's been going into the wetland, all those nutrients, has caused all this growth.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, that's the if with the sludge sitting in the stabilization pond, and then every now and then it turning and then spewing out some of the contaminants. That's basically food for whatever's there in the constructed wetland. So
Right.
that's basically keeping it nicely fed and happy. So once the stabilization pond is cleaned and it's no longer spewing out all these nutrients, then naturally there'll be a little bit of starving of the wetland to begin with, and then if there is a formal effort to clean it up, that'll help it as well.
Just one more follow up to do with all of that. I asked Councillor LeBlanc about this big pipe that's being put in now. Can either one or the other explain, because I'm getting questions from the public. What are we doing there? And I don't totally understand it. I had a hard enough time trying to understand this again. So
You're referring to the twinning of the force main
yeah,
that's going in right now?
yeah.
Mr. Councilman? Your microphone, Mr. Councilman.
Sorry. The force main has been a project that's been approved by council, and with the mind of trying to build in some redundancy associated with the lagoon system and the direct link from the main pumping station to the lagoon. So it allows for increased capacity. It also allows for shutting down one of the lines and doing proper maintenance from time to time. I know certainly my experience over the years has been when you have a single main line, it's difficult to shut that down over a period of time to do the necessary maintenance. So that's a project that has been ongoing for about a year or so. And they're just mobilizing right now and trying to complete the force main project. And the secondary item is to deal with the main pumping station and complete that project. Both are anticipated to be completed by late summer of this year.
Follow up?
Just to follow up on that. So that secondary pipe that's running into the pumping station, will there be clean outs along the way so that I try to use common sense sometimes, and common sense for me would be that there would be places that you could clean out, so instead of shutting the whole thing down. But maybe I have no technical experience.
I see Mr. Councilman's making a note. I'm sure he'll get back to council with the answer to that question. Thank you. Councillor Bateman.
I'm going to go a little more technical than Councillor LeBlanc.
I doubt it.
No. Based on everything we're reading here, because I'm no expert on this, will this solve the issues that we've had over time for ammonia? Will it add sufficient capacity for what we need now and what we envision in the future? I think that's what I'd like to know. I think that's what most of the public would like to know, that once this is done, we're not going to be revisiting this in 2 years, 3 years.
Dr. Rai?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. Because the GSS report, when they proposed this upgrade, they looked at the scenario of making the system adequate for the proposed future rated capacity of about 6,000 cubic meters per day. And that's what we looked at. So the answer is If the secondary clarifier is made according to the ministry guidelines, I mean, as proposed, it is theoretically adequate as well, but it'll just make the process smoother with the ministry and just take out any risk out of the equation if it is appropriately sized for the future flow. And then if the mixing aspect of the aeration is sorted out, this system will pack a lot of capacity that'll meet your future needs.
Any further questions from members of council? This is for clarification on the presentation. Go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
So on the 6,000 cubic meters for the secondary clarifier, let's say with our growth and everything after our secondary plan, so we should get the secondary plan to match what our secondary clarifier would be for our flow, because the aeration doesn't have to change because we get 2.4 days.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Even if we go to 7,000 cubic meters, we still have 2 days.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
To do any mechanical plant.
Right. Yeah.
So both documents should go hand in hand.
Correct. Yeah.
Secondary plan to know what our growth plan and for our residential and for that, and that's where you would design your secondary clarifier.
Right.
Trying to get this through for 12 years. Thank you.
You, Councillor Tadman.
Well, it'll be wonderful to be able to tell the public, since we've been talking about this since 2003. But I think that the main thing that has been the topic right from the beginning is that we haven't cleaned out the sludge properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done bits and pieces, but so we can tell now, as soon as we go by these recommendations, we have the capacity. Don't worry that your septic system is going to work. We have the capacity and we've got lots of room for growth. So I think hopefully that'll get out to the public, because half of conversations that I hear in the urban is that, why are you allowing more homes when we haven't got the room?
Well, and certainly at every planning meeting we sit at, we hear somebody ask, why are we putting more homes in when we don't have the capacity, which then we have to re-explain that we do have the capacity, but even better, we're going to have more.
Well, how many times have we heard this, Mayor, in the last 10 years? Because you and I've been, and you have too, that we have the capacity. It was one thing, ammonia.
Councillor Bateman.
Just a follow-up question. With the recommendations and everything that's in here, it all sounds great and we're going to have the capacity, but will any of these recommendations change the pricing? And that's probably more for Mr. Castleman.
CO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Once we get into the staff report in a few minutes, I'll chat about updating the pricing.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Follow up, since we have the PhD here with an engineering degree. When it comes to the secondary ponds, the ponds on the other side of County Road 64, you made the statement that it would not be required after this. I agree, but we're still getting flow going through, and they're still picking up contaminated tannic acid and phenol that we bring into the wetland. Once we get this in operation, should we abandon those systems?
Are you talking about the stabilization pond?
No, the constructed wetland.
Yes, I'll say so. I mean, it'll potentially become redundant. It doesn't really will have much to do in terms of removal of contaminants.
Any further questions from members of council? Councillor Anderson.
I probably missed a couple of things here because there's lots of good information going around, but to make it simple answer for me, have we got 20 years left on this system once it's completed and with potential of the growth that we are looking at?
Should be more than that. Maybe Director Walsh could answer that. When we get to 6,000, could you come as if you were a delegation, sir? A visitor.
To the mayor, the council. So the original residual capacity of our sanitary system is equivalent to about 10 years of our current build out rate.
Right
to
now.
get to us to 6,000 cubes. Yeah. So if we include all the lands in the secondary plan, and that's a lot of the greenfield areas, so certain lands are designated greenfields. And so we're receiving applications for those now, and in fact, one probably this month for a staff meeting. Once we have some of the projects coming up for those greenfield areas, then we would be looking at pushing the upper threshold of that residual capacity or even exceeding it.
The existing residual capacity.
Existing residual capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
And together with some of these proposals coming forward, the suggestion of staff or the plan of staff is bring forward a policy saying no residual capacity shall be allocated to any development except at the time of subdivision agreement. In other words, we won't guarantee it. We can get you to draft approval so that you have confidence of investment as a developer, but after which you will need to be patient for our infrastructure.
But when this project is complete and we have 6,000 cubic meters per day of total capacity, what then is the build out?
Well, we do right now, we're looking at a per capita flow rate of about 415 liters per day per capita. Actually, it's a little higher than that, based on the annual wastewater reports, not including 2021. 2021 was a relatively drier year or lower flow year, so those numbers can be updated with that 2021 statistic put into it. And that's assuming a 3-year averaging, where the regional director of the Ministry of Environment will actually dictate what kind of time period that they really want you to do your averaging, whether it's 3 or 5 or 7. But so we'll have to update that and with the draft approvals that are coming forward. And we have pre-servicing agreements coming forward as well for Butler Creek and probably for Brighton Meadows. And so we'll have to have that servicing policy or the allocation policy come concurrently.
I'm not sure we're getting the answer we're looking for. Councillor Anderson?
The actual number, don't know. Have to
You don't,
calculate it.
so there will be a calculation at some point
Yes.
and you'll be able to report that out to council.
Yes.
Thank you.
So with that calculation, that really interests me. Commercial, industrial, we will have that. We'll have more of that in the future. With all the new residents, there has to be new services, there has to be new commercial. We've done a great job selling our industrial property, and it's barely starting up. It's just getting going. Is that been in the equation as well? And if it hasn't, let's put something in there as well. But I'm really interested to know that we're not going to have other, even 5-10 years from now, that there'll be there'll be maintenance on this. And I'd be interested in knowing what type of maintenance costs are on this in a given year. We haven't got, this isn't budget time, I realize that, but those are interesting things to know too, going into this. So what's it going to cost to operate this? And what does the future look like? The full, not just based on housing but based on the whole picture. And I believe this area we should be looking at the full picture because it's coming this way.
I'm just going to ask Director Walsh to answer the question about the inclusion of industrial commercial properties.
Thank you. That's all I'm really able to answer.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No problem. I understand. The MOE formula that gets used in estimating residual capacity is what's considered a residential equivalency. So the thinking or the model is that as the population growth, it's also supported by commercial industrial at a constant rate as per historical rate. So when I referred to 415 liters per day per capita, then that constant is projected forward. MOE will accept the idea that you're making improvements because new infrastructure doesn't have infiltration and exfiltration like the old stuff does. So we can get that number down if we can convince MOE, and they are accepting much lower numbers. But again, just to answer your question, that it's considered residential equivalency. So the industrial commercials is built into that number. Yeah. Always has been. Yeah, you take the total flow and divide it by your number of connections and that sort of thing, and that gives you the equivalency.
Thank you for that. And Director Whitfield or CAO, have we contemplated the maintenance costs of a new system? I can't imagine we've been down that road yet. No. So we don't know the answer to that quite yet. Councillor Bateman.
I was just going to ask a follow-up for the director. When they go back and they look at the 2-year average, do you know if they'll go back further? Because we all know due to the pandemic, our provincial park has only been running at partial capacity. And are we going to look at how much that will impact now that, for all intents and purposes, the province is opening up and all your parks will be at full capacity and impacting that?
Director Walsh.
Yeah, some specific regard was given to the park flows, and in the grand scheme of things, the information given to me by the manager of the sanitary side at the time was that the flows from the park were relatively low in proportion to other flows. So it can go up and down and maybe not upset our total flows too much. But yeah, I was hoping to maybe deal with MOE to work that factor to rationalize our flows a little bit better because we have that unique connection. But the feedback I was given today is that it wouldn't factor too much.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Basically, Councillor Walsh, I mean, the Director of Planning and our consultant. So basically, our systems right now, we're running relatively cheap compared to other towns, other municipalities, what they have to do for the water treatment from the lake, flocculation, sedimentation, anthracite, sand. We don't have to do that, just chlorinization and pumping. So we're getting away relatively cheap. Same as an activated sludge slide we have, was relatively cheap. To come up to the new standards, to meet the regulation, we're going to have to pay that cost, but we're not going to have to pay $400,000 to $500,000 every 3 years or 2 years to remove the sludge. That's going to be added into our costs and our savings. In reading Mr. Anderson's report ahead, and we're just going to go ahead, for the minimal cost of going from 6,000 to 7,000 cubic meters, adding more industry and probably another 2,000 homes and probably be more jobs to the employment lands. It's a relatively cost to building a whole new wastewater treatment plant because we only have to increase the size of the clarifier. Am I correct, Mr. Consultant?
Yeah,
Did you have a
correct.
question,
Yeah.
Dr. Rai?
Yes, I did. And there are other options as well. I mean, there are technological advances and there are options. Putting more secondary clarifier is an option, but if we're hurting for space and footprint, then so you could do something else in the lagoon at the aerated cell itself that will give you more capacity.
But while we're building, it's the time to do it. It's minimal cost. You don't have to break the ground. It's only steel. You're just making a circle bigger and a weir bigger. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you all. Anything further from members of council? I would think so as well. Thank you, Councillor Tadman. So with that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council receive the presentation from Harpreet Rai, RV Anderson regarding technical review of the Brighton wastewater pollution control plant upgrades. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you, Dr. Rai. Appreciate your attendance here at council and the information you provided us tonight.
Thank you. All have a good night. Bye now.
Take care now.
Thank you. Bye.
That takes us to citizens' comment. Citizens' comment is an opportunity for members of the public to submit comments or ideas to council on matters appearing before council on tonight's agenda. A maximum of 10 minutes is set aside for citizens' comment, leaving each speaker with 2 minutes to provide council with their comment. It is noted that language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Comments will be received without comment, debate, or questions from council. The presiding officer may request clarification and or additional information on the comments from the member of the public. Our citizens' comment comes from David Green of Lockwood Drive. Mr. Green. The comment is with regard to the HR audit quotes and processes.
Yes, thank you. For the record, David Green. I am speaking to agenda item 9.6 tonight, the organizational review. I was very optimistic after the 2018 election that we had elected a council that for the most part could or would work together for the betterment of our municipality. We were doing great. We got projects completed. You worked mostly well together, and I was looking forward to a calm end of term. Well, apparently not so much. For some reason, some councillors took it upon themselves to be the staff liaison, which is really unusual because the only member of staff who reports to council is the CAO. You suddenly forgot your responsibilities as a council, that is to provide legislation and governance to the municipality for the members of the municipality. Instead, you became the sounding board for non-management staff, and that is not your role. Fast forward to the motion to conduct an HR audit. At least that's what the intent was. How did you forget that there's already an audit in place? It may not have been quick enough for you, but you have the tools to address that if you didn't like it. Rather, you took it upon yourself to create mayhem and ordered staff to get quotes for an HR audit without even asking or recognizing where the current HR review was. If you didn't like where the HR review was going, you had the responsibility and the power to fix that. So now there's a report from staff to spend $110,000 on an HR audit, HR review, HR witch hunt, whatever you wish to choose it. And you know in your heart of hearts, the cost will be greater than $110,000. It always is. Now take into account the term of this council. You go lame duck in early August. Will the report be done by then? Even if it is done by then, will it be reviewed and implemented? I don't think so. So we spent in excess of $110,000 for review that will be passed on to the next council. They won't even consider it. You wouldn't have considered it when you came into this role, because you came into this role and you said, I'll be different. I won't do that. I won't design a sidewalk because I have no knowledge or ability to do that. That was the disappointing part. You keep saying, I'll be different. The next council will say, no problem, I'll be different. Well, not so much given the direction and the pending notices of motion that I'm seeing tonight. Now, you may have the authority to spend this money, but in my mind, you don't have the responsibility to spend this money. You're leaving office. Paying this amount through a contingency, that's not what a contingency fund is for. The sky is not falling. Nothing needs attention. Nothing is that broken. It's beyond repair. So 3 members of council have made their position quite obvious. I ask the remaining 4 members of council to please consider the road that this will take us down. It won't end up in a good place. And to some degree, this action has already caused members of staff and management to leave the municipality. In my mind, that alone has put us back years. So please, the 4 of you, think long and hard about what this action will result in, because in my mind, nothing good will come of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. That is the only citizen's comment this evening. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council received the citizens' comments submitted at April 25th council meeting. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion's carried. That takes us into staff reports. Our first report is with regard to the wastewater pollution control plant proposed upgrade technical review. Mr. Castleman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Really, 3 highlights. The report is dealing with the peer review that we just heard from Harpreet, and it's making a recommendation that we're going down the right path with some modifications. So we're asking council to turn their mind to accepting that report and moving forward with the modified environmental assessment that we've been told we need by the MECP. Quite frankly, we've been working hand in hand with MECP for some time now and coming up with a solution that we can all live with. The bottom line is we want to have something in the ground that's going to meet our needs for the next 20 years or so. And we're trying to do that. We think we've come up with a design that will accomplish those goals. We're fairly confident in that regard. We've had a peer review with respect to the conceptual design. We've presented that conceptual design to MECP representatives had it vetted. And generally speaking, they're on board with respect to the direction that we're taking. That's a great partnership. So the next logical step is to move forward with a modified EA in order to take a look at this design in a little bit more detail, update the projected population that we've been experiencing over the last number of years. If we're going to find a solution for 20 years, let's have the latest, greatest data from a growth perspective and feed that into the system. So if we're talking about a clarifier size, we know what size that we want at the end of the day. And we've had some discussion this evening with respect to cost. We want to get an updated cost with respect to the proposed design that we have in mind, both a capital cost and an operating and maintenance cost. Both are important because at the end of the day, this group has to approve budgets, both from a capital perspective and a rate perspective. You have to be able to substantiate whatever rates, water and wastewater, that you're going to charge the residents. And you have to have some good data and the ability to back up what your rate structure is going to be. So what we've done from a staff perspective is we've said, okay, we've been directed by MECP to go down a path and get a modified EA completed. And we thought, okay, what's the fastest way of doing that? Well, we had JL Richards help us out back in 2017. They did the original EA. We thought from a staff perspective, we need to get on with this. So from a speed and knowledge basis and from a cost perspective, we thought it would be more beneficial for the municipality to sole source to JL Richards to help us out. So we approached JL Richards to get a proposal in that regard. I've attached that proposal for council's consideration. And the proposal is $69,000, I think, plus HST. It's going to take about 3 months to complete or so. It's going to provide us with updated data from a population growth perspective. It's also going to provide us with some updated costing, both from a capital and operating and maintenance perspective. So the three parts of the staff recommendation is to acknowledge and receive the peer review that we just heard about. Secondly, we've been working behind the scenes with our internal group to come up with a conceptual design. We met back in August of last year. We reported out to council in that regard. So it's just an acknowledgement of that process and reporting out in August of 2021. And the third recommendation is let's get on with the Class EA that we have to do and sole source to GL Richards and move forward with that project. You know, we've got a new strat plan that we put together collectively, and we prioritize this project. And what I'm suggesting from a staff perspective is let's get on with it. We've got much to do over the course of the next year or so with respect to this whole project. So this is the start of getting on with the EA and going down the various steps to substantiate the design, a conceptual design that we have in mind. Those are the three recommendations associated with the report.
Thank you, Mr. Castleman. With the motion, I have moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Bateman. The council receive the RV Anderson report, Brighton Wastewater Pollution Control Plant Proposed Upgrade Technical Review. And the council received a staff report titled Brighton Wastewater System Compliance Upgrades as Information. And the council proceed with single sourcing JL Richards and Associates to complete a Schedule B Class EA addendum and conceptual design for the Brighton Wastewater System Compliance Upgrade. Questions or comments from members of council? Deputy Mayor. Can you, can you draw your microphone closer, please? Keep going.
Musical microphone. Is that better? So you all missed the part about my education and sludge and ammonia and other things brown. Anyway, my question is, once we have this done, you're talking about 3 months or so. When are we going to get the upgrades done? I guess, what's the time frame for that? And as staff, do you have confidence that this is finally going to be the fix that we need?
CAO.
Not an engineer, or certainly I'm not an engineer. So we farm that out to people like Harpreet to assist us in that regard and get the best advice from a benchmarking perspective that we can. We're all anxious to find the right solution. We think we're on the right track. We're confident that we're on the right track. You know, the EA will be completed in 3 months or so. There's a whole process after that. You know, the EA isn't going to result in a detailed design at the end of the day. You got to get, you got to go from this design down to a detailed design. And so you're going to have to retain someone to assist us in that regard. And in due course, we're going to sign off on a detailed design. We're going to get it out to tender and get going with the project. So there's a process that we're involved in. The good thing is that we've been working in partnership with MECP, and they're happy that we're moving forward positively with this project. They were they liked what they saw from a peer review conceptual design. So I think it's incumbent upon both council and staff to continue to move forward with that type of partnership with MECP and find the right solution at the end of the day. So I'm certainly looking at it as a partnership and moving forward positively, getting to the final design and going through the tender process as quickly as we can. In the interim, we're going to do a few different things, like we've already let the sludge removal out of the stabilization pond. That contract has already been let, so we're going to get on with that this summer. I can't remember exactly when, June, July, August, whenever that happens to be. So we heard a lot about sludge removal and ammonia, bleeding and all that sort of good stuff. And so we need to take that positive step, that first positive step, and get on with the sludge removal. So that's sort of the process that I think is going to unfold over the course of the next 6 to 8 months.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
My question was pretty well the same as the deputy mayor. Just wondering, I think this is a positive move forward. My question was also around, would we be able to implement any of the suggestions already made in this proposal? So as far as sludge removal, we're going to get some of that done. That's going to make an improvement already. And I guess we'll just wait and see what else gets done then. Thank you.
And I think it's important to remember that the project underway right now, the force main and upgrades we're all, remember, part and parcel of this project. And we divided that off so we could start moving down that road. So we are doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. We just had to pivot a little bit in order to get a proper system for our community. Anything else from members of council? Councillor Anderson.
Mr. Castleman, I'll just touch on one thing. You're not in a position right now, but to answer this, but funding for these type of projects, it'll be a year away or so when we might be applying again, or when we would do that. No, I know you don't have the answer, but there's been in our neighboring municipalities have had some substantial wastewater funding. You see these presentations every day almost. We aren't there right now. I understand that. There will be a new, and I'm not talking politics, there will be a new government. And by the time we get to the point we're able to say, here's a project that we need support. So our local taxpayers don't take the whole burden on this, or we pass that burden on to them. Nobody, it's all tax money. I understand that. People say, well, it's coming out of our pocket anyhow. you don't want it directly out of the pocket of Brighton residents. So where would, maybe quick answer, where would you see that going?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to answer that. This is going to be a significant project, one of the largest projects that we've dealt with in the last 25 years or so. So we need to look carefully at it. We've budgeted, certainly, my recollection is we budgeted about $8.8 million so far. Believe it or not, we look every week for different grant programs that are available. We have a circular that comes around and we send it off to all the staff. So we're very mindful of all the different grant programs. And, Mr. Miller, as an example, got $400,000 for the new roof over at the arena. We just got notice for a new water main down Main Street, a $2.9 million project. We got about 74% funding. We just had the announcement on broadband and a much needed improvement to our community. So we're always looking at the strat plan and looking at priorities that the community and council will set, and always looking at grant opportunities that are out there. I know that certainly Mr. Hagerman was talking to me this morning about a tourism recovery grant and trying to move forward with that as quickly as we can. So needless to say, we're always on the lookout for grants. Obviously, we have to look very closely with respect to the financing, whether it's going to be rate or debenture or reserves or a combination of the three, and any potential grants that might be out there. So do I have a definitive answer? No, right now, but I can assure you that we're always on the lookout for grants that might be available.
And I think it's important also to remember that municipalities that tend to get wastewater upgrade grants are running at significantly higher capacity levels than the municipality of Brighton. So you'll see that number that says we're at 72% of our capacity. The most recent grant I saw went to a community that was at 122% capacity. So they were over.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so they really needed it. We know, and our province knows, that we need it to solve an ammonia problem. And certainly our current MPP knows that we need money to help solve the ammonia problem. He hears from me fairly frequently on this issue, and I know he hears from other members of this council as well on that issue. So if he's re-elected, he will certainly continue to hear from me. And if someone else is elected, that new person will start hearing from me, and I'm sure members of this council on that issue. Follow up?
I just, Bob, I think we should thank the staff though for doing what they have done the past years, but like excellent as far as getting those funds that are, I know it's in an election year, but we've gone after it and you've gone after it. So we've been successful and I won't talk about the past. I'm just saying the past year or two has been excellent as far as getting even small amounts for small projects. It all adds up. So thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Tadman?
Okay, that's what
I just, it's always, you have to have a price tag on anything, and things have to be shovel ready before you even apply for a grant. We don't have those numbers right now. So how do we go anywhere to try to apply for grants? I mean, we have to be patient until.
We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
That's the important thing, is we are making progress here. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. This isn't so much based on the cost of the J.O. Richards thing, but I did have one question. Councillor LeBlanc brought it up when the consultant was here regarding infiltration. You were talking about a lot of infiltration, I think, via sump pumps and things. Do we have a project in or is that kind of on our radar as well as to how to fix some of those things as far as this stuff not loading up into this sewage system?
I know we have rules around this. Pardon me, CAO.
Your microphone's not on. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The quick answer is absolutely. And we have had some funds budgeted for an aggressive I&I program. And what you heard tonight and what we've known for some time is that if you want to buy capacity back, you get rid of you lower your I&I at the end of the day. So money spent in getting a tighter system is money well spent, in my view, because of the necessary large capital infrastructure improvements that you need if you don't do that. So we heard that pretty clearly tonight.
So will we be doing anything like that this year? Do we have a program in place, or is that something that we just have to wait until the rest of this project is kind of looked into?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have a couple projects on the go with respect to wastewater and our water modeling system, and some recommendations need to be brought forward in that regard. But we're always looking at fixing and doing old roads, and when you do that, you invariably tighten up the system. What we've been tackling, Napoleon and that area over there where we've got some weaknesses. We're doing Addison next, and those are the old parts of town that, in my view, are probably a little loose from an I&I perspective. So we're taking steps to try and make improvements. You can't get it all done at once because we don't have the dollars or the manpower to do just that.
Anything further from members of council? Deputy Mayor?
As far as like some pumps and that sort of thing, we've talked about that off and on, and we do have a bylaw. But I know when I built my house and put in my ditch along the side of the house to drain my sump pump into, people thought I was nuts. Why am I doing that? Just put it into the sewer system. I said, because we're not allowed to. And they said, really? So, some education would be good in that regard. People don't realize that they're buying houses and that's already been done, or they just think it's the way to get rid of water. But I think there's probably a big problem there that probably could be tackled somehow.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc.
And I don't know if the members of the council missed, but when we had our expert, we talked about the MBBR. He says that it wasn't the right system for what we wanted to achieve. So I just wanted to know that he did say that. And when it comes to sub pumps, we got to look at it, and there's ways of doing it, especially with some of the new subdivisions, because they only got one sewer line out. So you just put your monitoring device there, metering device, and you can tell when the rain flow comes, if the sub pump kinks in, how far it jacks up, and that's easily found.
Thank you, Councillor Cadman.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we, in the past, had the water department go and check for illegal hookups, but we also found out that there was nowhere to drain it to in some places. So we had to give permission for some people to put it in there, or else they were flooding their neighbors and everybody else out.
But I think it's one thing if they connect to the storm system. It's quite another if they connect to the sanitary system. I don't think either are really allowed, but
No.
If they connect to the storm system, I think we could accept that a little bit better than if they connect to the sanitary system.
Absolutely.
Deputy Mayor, you're good. Anyone else? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Our next report is with regard to the emergency purchase of a tanker pumper. Chief Thompson, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor and councillors. So we put together a report to replace our tanker from Station 2 or 281. It's a 33-year-old international. It's paid for itself many times, I'm going to say. Right now in our mechanic, we did our safety on it this year. He doesn't figure it's going to make a safety for next year because the frame's starting to deteriorate, and it's time to replace it. So it was in the budget, the capital forecast for 2022 to replace this truck, and we ended up finding one in Quebec because of supply chain issues right now in the fire service for 20 to 24 months to get a truck. So a good example is that it's a truck that Chief Caddick ordered in 2020. Deputy Chief Hutchinson and I are going to check that out this week. So that truck's already 2 years old before we even get it in our hands. This truck we found in Quebec. There's lots of people interested in it. We were lucky to find it was more luck than good management. I will say that. But we found it, and they are going to hold it for us until tomorrow. If I could get your approval from council's approval tonight to go ahead with our capital forecast budget for 2022 with an additional $10,000 added on to that. We heard today Crammy is looking for a pumper, and they're saying theirs is going to be up to 60% increase. We can't get these trucks anywhere. They can't get fuel trucks. They can't get fire trucks, obviously. And the increase of the trucks themselves is at least 10%. So 10% on 550 per year is going to be another $100,000 by the time we wait, if we order it today. Happy to answer any questions. The report was pretty self-explanatory. And yeah, so I have your worship.
Thank you, Chief. In my experience is the harder we work, the luckier we get. With that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that council receive this report, provide authority to the fire chief to inspect and purchase the 2022 pumper tanker if the vehicle meets all requirements. Is there any discussion? Councillor LeBlanc.
So this is a new truck on an old frame? Through your chair.
Sorry, it's a new cab chassis.
With an old,
The box itself is a refurbished box. It's completely refurbished with new doors. So all you're going to have is some marine grade aluminum on the frame itself. The tank was being replaced. It was a poly tank before. It's been replaced with an aluminum tank, which is lighter weight for us, more capacity, as well as it's easier to fix. So if something breaks on that truck, we can take it to a local weld shop and have the aluminum welded, versus a plastic tank where you have to take that truck out of service to have it sent away to have it repaired. Other than that, it's exactly what we're looking for. It's got a 1050 imperial gallon pump on it, Hale pump, which we already run Hale pumps. It's a single stage centrifugal pump. It is going to give us some more capacity in the rural section, because in the rural we don't have hydrants. So that's our hydrant. We're taking our hydrant to the scene. It's a 2,500 gallon capacity, which we have now currently. I will add, in station 2 right now, we have a used pumper from Crammy that we borrowed 4 months ago, and we have our rescue unit because our tanker is sitting in our public workshop down here getting fixed. So we have station 3 and station 1 in Trent Hills on standby for us at this time, but we're in desperate need to get the fleet management up, which I'll try to bring a report to you before this fall, but to keep ahead of this, the fleet management part of the fire service. We need this for our tanker accreditation as well. We're telling our public that we're supplying 200 gallons a minute for 2 hours. And right today, unless we had our neighbors, we wouldn't be able to do that.
thank you. So you said it's a centrifugal pump, not a natural flow?
No, it's correct. It's a centrifugal pump.
So single stage or 2 stage?
Single stage, high pressure, high volume.
So, because you know, we've talked about pumps quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'm not going to tackle you on the pumps.
Thank you.
But, I got pretty good knowledge of the fire pumps.
I know you do.
Thank you both, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And I believe we're just here to approve a 10% or $10,000 increase to budget, correct?
And authorize a sole source.
And authorize sole source. I'm good with that.
There you go. Thank you. Anything further? Anyone else? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to a report on magazine advertising report. Director Whitfield, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council supports advertising and publications for the National Wall of Remembrance, Courageous Companions, and Anavets for a total expenditure of $1,214. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. This is something that we do annually anyway, isn't it, Linda? This isn't something new.
These are the same. Yeah, it's an annual thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tadman.
I was just going to say the same thing there, and it's the least we can do to support them with this small amount of money.
There you go. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Our next report is with regard to the public consultation and communication policy. Mr. Miller, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a couple of things I just wanted to highlight. That this policy targets municipal council and its various committees, boards, and also includes all municipal departments, facilities, and authorities. Its general objective is to foster the opportunity for community members to participate actively in the development and management of municipal affairs, being mindful of the best interests of the community as a whole. So in all it'll help improve our communication when we do projects and whatnot.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And with that, I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Connect, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council approves and adopts a new public consultation and communication policy for the municipality of Brighton as depicted in schedules attached here too. Is there any discussion? Councillor Bateman.
I like this. This really came about when we were debating and talking about the pickleball courts down in Gosport. So I think this is a great thing, and that's why we put that motion at the time. I do just want to highlight that where it says they voiced their concerns about municipally planned projects, that's partially true. What they really voiced their concerns about was the timing of when they found out. It doesn't really have to be tweaked in there, but that's where the residents got up on arms because they find out through hearsay or they read it and they felt they should be consulted, kind of like when we had talked about this mirroring the Planning Act and giving them substantial notice.
Thank you. Anything further for members of council? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is with regard to the hiatus of council and committee meetings. Madam Clerk, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight? Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman. The council receives and approve the staff report regarding the hiatus of committee meetings during the election period, and further that council approve taking a hiatus from council planning and committee of the whole meetings during the months of October and November 2022, and suspending all advisory committee meetings as of October 1st, 2022 until the new year of 2023. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Is this something new? We've not done this before, as far as I recall, that there's always been kind of some sense of council/committee meetings through this period.
Madam Clerk.
Yes, in the past, we have had meetings, but we found that it was very difficult to run an election at that in October. The election is actually in October, so it's very hard for us to do that and do committee support at the same time.
Thank you. Councillor Tadman.
Just the one thing, it talks about committees, but I think we're obligated to still complete the board meetings.
Board meetings are separate.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
run by
that's what I
different
mean.
acts.
That's what I'm at.
Yeah,
They're
it's
part of
just the
act.
committees and for council.
And most of our boards aren't, we don't have administrative support
No.
from the clerk's office.
Just the police services board.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The ones I sit on anyway.
Yeah. Councillor Anderson.
May not matter, but does this exclude an emergency meeting if the mayor
No.
decided? So
No.
he could still call an emergency meeting, okay, in case something.
No, yeah. So if something came up, we would still be able to do within the lame duck rules, right? I mean,
That's
don't
right.
forget, we are likely going to be in lame duck, or we imagine that we will be. Councillor Rowley.
I guess that's maybe some of my concern. I think, particularly planning issues and concerns, they don't stop because of an election either. And I don't want to see our kind of staff have to double up either in September or triple up maybe come November. So that might be where my concerns are as well, as to how does that workload change for some.
It would be only one meeting that we would miss, because we would go back in November 15th is when you do your inaugural meeting. So maybe two planning meetings at the most, if any.
The new council, it's not like the old rules. The new council will be sworn in mid-November-ish.
15th, I think.
So there's no reason that there couldn't be a planning meeting at the end of November with that new council. So theoretically, only one planning meeting would be missed.
I think if we ask Paul, when we receive the applications in, we could make sure that we were for October and then for December,
Well, let's-
we may have to double up.
Let's ask the director, since he's here now, if he feels that this would be problematic for his department.
Through the mayor and council, difficult to say right now. We're trying to get a couple of key pre-servicing agreements before council to get them going. I suspect they'll be addressed by council before that time frame. There's always critical timelines for applicants. So I mean, I think to the mayor's point, we can always call an emergency meeting if council is willing to consider that for any pressing planning matters.
So a special meeting could be called if the planning department felt that they needed to be under the timing, if they're under the gun from a timing perspective under the Planning Act.
Should that be in the motion just to, so people know? No?
The procedure bylaw provides me and or a majority of council to be able to call a meeting
Regardless.
regardless.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything further from members of council? Councilor LeBlanc?
No,
Just the month of October for council. Well, for this council, November. For the new council, the new council will be sworn in at a
In
meeting in November.
so not in this municipality, but in most municipalities, this is what they do. This is what they're doing in Coburg. They're doing it in Crammy, Trent Hills, all across the 7 municipalities. I believe they're all doing the same thing. It's just through the restrictive acts. There's a lot of things that you can't do, right? Financially. But it just makes sense to only have a council meeting if we need to.
Councilor Bateman?
I was just going to say, it really is due to the fact that it's being bumped up a month, correct? Because I don't think this council was sworn in until December 3rd or
December.
6th. So
That's
it's
right.
really a month earlier.
Yes.
So it's just the month of October. And I'm sure the planning department will make sure nobody's waiting in the queue of the planning department longer than they need to be so that any of their permits expire.
Right.
Okay.
And again, if that becomes problematic, we'll call a special meeting in council to deal with it. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion's carried. Brings us to a report with regard to the organizational review, RFP CAO 2022 org review. Mr. Castleman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Sure, just a few highlights. We've had some various discussions with respect to an organizational review back in February 22nd. Council passed a motion and gave me direction to have an organizational review conducted, and I went about doing just that. Didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so looked at local municipalities that had just gone through the organizational review process. So certainly took a look at Belleville, Coburg, and Gananoque, and used their templates with respect to moving forward with an organizational review. Had to go through the tender process, RFP tender process, and issued the RFP on the 14th of March, closed on April the 4th. We established an evaluation committee comprised of a number of different staff members, senior staff members. We took a look at the 2 submissions that we received, and the consensus was to rank the proponent of KPMG as the highest ranked. And we provided you with some financing of the 2 proposals that you received. Certainly KPMG is in or around $110,000. And the report from Consilium Public Sector Services is in around $90,000 or so. There's certainly been some discussion with respect to our ability to change the scope of work. So from my perspective, we have clear ability to either accept the proposal, reject the tender in its entirety, and or direct staff to modify the scope of work and negotiate that with the top ranked proponent. So those are the three options that I really see in this regard, and happy to take whatever direction the council would like to provide.
Thank you, CAO. With that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a contract with KPMG for the completion of an organizational review as outlined in Schedule 1 attached here 2. The funding for the completion of the subject contract be sourced through the contingency reserve. Is there any discussion for members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. This was my motion initially in February. My thought was definitely not to do a complete organizational review. I think I tried to make that clear many times. I know some of the wording in that motion was based on suggestions that I received from you at the time. I would like to ask for some clarification as to how, as the CAO just said, to shrink down the scope of work being more or less just an HR audit as to where my concerns were, and maybe some other members on council as to the fact as to why we've lost so many staff over the last year and a half. It was never to do a complete review. I know some of that has been ongoing. I know the CAO has been working on that, I think almost since he got here 3 years ago. I'm not sure how far, I know you have most of that complete, CAO. I think you are just working with the Public Works Department at this stage. But yes, I would like to have the scope of this work changed. And if we have to, if there's an opportunity to speak with the consultant that you have chosen to see how that can be shrunk down, or do we have to retender something differently?
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the first step that I would suggest, if we want to change the scope, that's fine. I would suggest that we have a discussion with KPMG and try and determine their willingness to modify the scope and determine what the cost differential might be. They may choose to negotiate or not. Don't know, but I would think that that would be the first step to, if we wanted to shrink down the scope of work, great. Let's try and define whatever that happens to be. And then we can negotiate with KPMG and see where we land at that stage. They're either going to accept and negotiate the modified scope of work, or they're not. And it's so should they choose not to, we can always go to the second proponent and negotiate on the same regard.
Go ahead as a follow-up.
Yes, more or less it is follow-up, but still, yeah. I know in the initial motion, it was, I guess maybe I wish that some of that step had to come to council for discussion regarding part of it being that when the RFP was drafted, that council could have had an opportunity to review that so that it didn't go out as this great big package, and that we would have been able to shrink it down then as to basically what my intentions of this this project should have been. We've kind of missed that. I know, but I would still like to see, I know $110,000 is a lot of money. That was never my intention to do a complete review. I would still like to do an audit based on some of the concerns based in my original motion. And I would be happy to sit down with the CAO or whoever to talk that over. And if those comments can be directed to either this consultant or however we have to move forward.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the CAO has followed council's direction. There was no request to bring that RFP document to council.
I'd like to, I think there was in the motion.
There was not. I reviewed the motion with the CAO, and there was no request to bring the RFP back to council.
I believe that there was. I'm not going to challenge that here. We can talk about that later. But I know in the initial motion, Mayor, We spoke about it. I had asked at the time that the clerk worked. You said that couldn't happen. It needed to be the CAO. But in that initial motion, there was to bring the RFP, to bring the scope of work for review and selection with council.
The motion that didn't pass.
The motion that did pass.
Well, I don't think it had the RFP to come back to council, but we can take a look at that and make sure. There, Councillor Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I really talk about the RFP and we're going to be talking about, there's just a couple of concerns, like the whole process hasn't sat well with me since the beginning and some of the stuff I've been seeing and reading. And I want to start by, I would really like to see an end of the term. We've heard it here tonight. I've read it in the newspaper multiple times where this is being referred to as a witch hunt. Because one that makes it sound like it's being targeted at one person, and historically the term witch hunt can be quite offensive to some. So I think we have to really watch the verbiage that we use when we're describing something, because once we make a decision in council, it's supposed to be supported outside the council chambers. You can disagree, and that's why we're here. We got 7 people and we're not always going to have the same opinion, but we can't use derogatory terms to describe the motion or what we're trying to accomplish, because that type of term and the other things that have been used, electioneering, witch hunt, it really is a metaphor for delegitimizing the intent of this motion or any motion if it takes place. And the other thing I've seen, we've heard it alluded to again tonight, and it's been in the newspaper. I take offense to hearing that a couple councillors are interfering with staff, because I haven't interfered with staff. I don't talk to staff, but when it's just a blanket statement that a couple are interfering with staff, that allows everybody to speculate on who it is. And I just don't think that type of stuff, that's just my own personal opinion. I don't need anybody to agree with me, but I just don't think it's fair. And I don't think that's what the public wants. The public doesn't want to hear all that, because the attention is not where it should be. It's on, sound bites. And to me, that's just wrong.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My questions are in regard to the actual motion in front of us. I heard that the goal from Councillor Rowley is to find out why so many staff members have left. And I do believe, and perhaps the CAO can confirm, that exit interviews were done with each and every person who's left. And there's also always an opportunity for staff to lodge a grievance if they have one. And I think that information, although maybe not available to council, we have received some of that information as far as why people have left here and there. I'm sure that it's not always, for us to know either. But can you just confirm those two things for me?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. We go about doing exit interviews for those who leave. That's part of the policy that we have in place. So do I keep track of that? You bet.
Follow up.
So I guess the information is there, but it's not necessarily for council to know. Is that correct? So if we're doing this organizational review or whatever it is, this HR review, we're asking an organization, a company, to go and interview the people who have left. But are they then going to be okay with council knowing what their answers are, or are we going to know what the answers are? I'm trying to wrap my head around the end goal and whether or not we're actually going to get there or not.
So the direction that I've received from the motion in February of this year was to interview all staff, including those who wish to participate that have resigned in the last 15 months, and to ensure that whatever conversations that take place remain anonymous. So I think those were 2 points that were made strategically and clearly to me, and I passed those on to the consultants in that regard.
Anything further from members of council? Councillor LeBlanc.
And I also January 21st. I have that. There is the, this is the right.
Just to be clear, I did not put a notice of motion on the floor. I offered wording to council to help council go down a road that I didn't agree with, but I was trying to help. I did not put a notice of motion on the floor. I did not put a notice of motion on the floor. Well, the next time I won't help anybody, Councillor LeBlanc. Is that what you want? Because I was trying to help this council move down a road, even though I didn't agree with it. So yes, I provided words to help council. I did not put a motion on the floor or a notice of motion. I would not put a motion on the floor that would cost this community $110,000 in unbudgeted funds, ever. Councillor Tadman.
Mayor, those words were all pre-prepared that night. You couldn't.
Yes, I gave those words to council to
had
help
those
them.
words pre-prepared before the meeting. You
Yes.
couldn't possibly write all that up ahead of time.
Yes, I did write that up ahead of time,
Okay, so that was what you proposed.
but I did not propose it. I did not put a motion on the floor, and I did not recommend a notice of motion.
Back to the witch hunt. I am not and will not acknowledge in any way that anybody that I know that sits here on council in any way is trying to harm any employee. And I have never heard anything to that effect. So I take great offense. I asked you once before if you would apologize, but you've gone out the brush. You've been on a radio station. I don't know what else you're doing because I don't follow you, but I hear it. And I think it's, you talk about what we're doing, the four of us, and what was your other, a poor man's, no, something about a fool's errand, a fool's errand. I'm not a fool, and neither are the other three of us. We have concerns. We should be able as a council, and it was a majority of council that had concerns. It costs a lot of money to keep hiring new people, advertising and training new people. So those are just some of my comments for now. You will not publicly apologize for this because I know your character well enough that you never would.
Anything further from members of council? Councillor Bateman?
Just so I understand how the notice of motion, that I wasn't at that meeting. That was the special council meeting where I was still at home, but you had read the wording and stuff, but there was a first on it. And so it's not being classified as a motion on the floor because no seconder was on it, or does it become a motion when you have the first?
There was no motion on the floor. We didn't get a seconder.
So that's what disqualified it as being a motion on the floor. You
That's
got to the first and not the second. And just to follow up, I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I know we're supposed to be talking about the motion, but this ties into it. And this is no disrespect. And I know it usually falls under that job title, but I'm confused because on the February 22nd meeting, the CAO excused from health on the advice of a solicitor and partaking in this discussion. And here we are partaking in the discussion. And they also took part in the RFP process. I would have thought that if you've excused yourself at the beginning, that you'd be excused all the way through. I can't declare a conflict and then rejoin the conversation next time it comes up. I'm confused on how this is working.
The CAO was told to go out and get an RFP and has brought a report to council. At that meeting on whenever it was, the CAO, on the advice that we were told, on the advice of his solicitor, did not wish to make comment on the report. He was given direction after that and has provided council with that direction, with the RFP based on that. So I'm just reading the actual motion that was, the notice of motion that was put on the floor in February. Council directs staff to provide 3 quotes. I guess we could only get 2. That the HR firm be directed to conduct a management review. Council directs the firm to advise all members of staff that shall be interviewed. The HR firm ensure participants be interviewed. Council direct the HR firm be advised that all members of council shall be interviewed. Council directs the HR firm to also conduct exit interviews. The municipality who have left the municipality in the last 15 months, and council directs the HR firm be advised that the final report shall be released directly to all of council, and that the HR firm present their findings along with recommendations to council. So nowhere in there about the RFP coming back to council. That's just what I was checking on. Anything further from members of council, Deputy Mayor?
There's also nowhere in there that it says that the exit interviews will be confidential. It says that there'll be a full report to council. So that doesn't really answer my question. I guess at this point, I'm wondering if we're voting on this as it is, or whether that there will be a revision.
As of right now, we're voting on it as is.
How can we change that? I would like to modify the scope of work. So what do you want me to do?
Well,
Excuse me.
We'll either have to get the motion withdrawn, or you could work with the mover and seconder, being Councillors Bateman and Anderson, to revise the motion. But I think we should probably withdraw this motion if we're going to change the scope of work. CAO?
Just a thought would be perhaps defer tonight, giving Councillor Rowley and myself an opportunity to revise the scope of work and go back and negotiate with KPMG. So I'm happy to meet with Councillor Rowley or whoever else to revise the scope of work if that's the intention of council. So I would suggest perhaps a deferral.
Councillor Blanc? The initial one, yes. The initial one. Well, that's between you and Councillor Rowley and the CAO. If you're having a private meeting, I don't organize meetings for the CAO.
Could we have, when's our next meeting after tonight? May 2nd, May 3rd? May 2nd?
Yeah, next week, next Monday. Councillor Anderson.
So to get it right, to be a scope of work change, with that and if you could give me a bullet point, what that might look like. I don't want the whole thing. What are we going to do? Are we going to ask, is this HR person going to just ask the CEO the same questions that we could ask the CEO ourselves, or are you going to include everybody? What scope of work is it going to be?
Well, we can sit down and talk about that. Like I said, it doesn't need to be a complete organizational review. That is something that's already ongoing. My concerns, along with maybe some other members of council, have concerns as to why some key positions have once again emptied out here in the municipality. And I would just like to see why we're there. As you said, at the beginning of this term, yes, we were optimistic that we were able to fill some key positions here. Since then, we have lost some of those. That is also a costly initiative for this municipality. When we lose people, we have to rehire, we have to retrain. Some of these people haven't even been here for a year. That's a big concern to me, correct? So I would like to maybe sit down then and figure out what we're going to do, get some suggestions from the CAO as well. But the organizational review is something that's already ongoing. It has been ongoing for 3 years. I'm assuming it should be almost finished, but this is to just figure out where some of these concerns are coming from. Why do we have these concerns? Why are staff members leaving? I want to figure that out.
So four of us attended the Ontario Good Roads Association conference a couple weeks ago,
Right.
and a few of the sessions, including one of the larger sessions, dealt with labor relations. human resources retention in the municipal environment, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a few things that we heard. I don't know who was in the room when I heard these things, but one of them is that we are dealing with a national labor shortage, coast to coast. There are more jobs available than there are people to fill them, and we can't make enough babies fast enough, and or bring enough people into this country fast enough with skilled labor. Across Ontario every day, 338,000 jobs go unfilled. That's not 4 in the municipality of Brighton. That's 338,000 jobs in the province of Ontario, according to the Ministry of Labor. Now, some of the HR people at this meeting, this conference, were suggesting that municipalities should engage in things like engagement surveys to see what people are looking for in their employment. It's not always money, we know that. It could be time, it could be work from home opportunities. The one HR person suggested that while exit interviews are important to discover why people are leaving, perhaps the municipality should undertake things like stay interviews. Someone's been here a year, why'd you stay? Why didn't you go find another job somewhere else? Because we know they're available and we know they're right next door. So why are you still here? Why has Director Whitfield stayed over the course of many, many years with some pretty rapids that she's helped flow through? So I think it would be good to know why someone like Director Whitfield has stayed through all that time. And maybe this is what we should be looking at from an HR policy point of view, is having someone come in and talk to us about what policies we should be setting in place to engage people, to keep people, to retain employees, rather than finding where the big concerns are, or I know you all object to a witch hunt, so finger pointing exercise, or whatever this ends up being, because that's really what this is. When we start bringing auditing firms in to look at the problems, it is a finger pointing exercise. It is who did what wrong. And I don't think that that's very healthy, frankly. I think what we need maybe is for someone to come in and say, okay, you've got ABCs of HR policies in your Bible of policies. You should have XYZs of HR policies as well in the new environment. I think it's also important to know that there is a generation of people graduating from university who will not stay in a job more than 2 years. That's what HR people are saying everywhere. They will come, they will go, they may not show up to work one day and just never come back. And that's the generation we're dealing with. There are people at my employer who we call, they say they're coming, they don't show up. We go, where'd you go? Well, we just didn't want to come in, so we didn't show up. That's the environment we're living in. That's the labor relations world we have to deal with. And if every time we lose 3, 4, 5 employees, we spend $110,000, that's a lot of money. But even if we spend $30,000 over the course of 3 or 4 years, that's another $90,000, only to find out this is the world we live in. And it sucks, but we gotta manage through it, and we gotta manage through it as a team, as a staff team and as a council team, and not do this, let's bring in an expensive KPMG. Could you imagine? An expensive auditing firm to find out that we're no different than any other employer across Northumberland County or Quinte.
Well, we don't know that we aren't any different, correct? We don't know. We're a small municipality, right? We have a level of customer service that we to the residents of the municipality, and we can't keep plugging and filling holes.
That was the other thing the HR consultant at the conference said, is make sure you have a customer code of conduct to ensure that the customers and the people dealing with our frontline workers are behaving the way they should be behaving. Because I suspect that it's not just council that's members of council that are misbehaving. I suspect it is also some customers out there that are misbehaving.
Well, now we're kind of shifting blame, aren't we? Yes. So anyway, however we do this, I'm not sure if we want to defer this. I am not a mover or seconder of this motion here on
You
this
could put a
table.
motion to defer on the floor.
What's that?
You could put a motion to defer on the
Don't
floor.
do it.
I'm not ready to do that yet at this stage. I want to see this through. How we do it might need to be kind of compromised, but I still want to see the reasons as to why we are where we are. As you said, Mayor, all municipalities, I'm not worried about other municipalities. I'm worried about my municipality, and I'm worried about the 11,000 plus people who live here. So I would just like to kind of shrink down the scope of work. If we can amend that in the motion, if we can have that discussion with the consultant, we can do something. If I know we heard earlier from Mr. Green, if we let this go, we're going to be August before it's done. I don't think it's that big of a project really that it's going to take all summer or all. We've got somebody here, let's deal with them the best we can. Let's change the scope of work and let's get to the bottom of where some of our problems are.
So just to be clear, we have 100 people that need to be interviewed. That's the initial scope here of this project. The current staffing, people who've left in 15 months, all members of council. Give or take.
Give or take.
100 people.
Well, let's just have that conversation.
Councillor Tadman.
My understanding right from the beginning of all this, it wasn't just who had left the municipality. It was to see if we had the right complement in all departments. I hear many times how many ads I see in the paper. Are you hiring more people? I can't justify all the hiring, but that's me personally. So I'm thinking it's more a general all audit, not just to find out why people are leaving. So I would definitely stay with what we got on the floor tonight, and I wouldn't defer it because you're going to water it down so much, Councillor Rowley, that it won't be worth anything.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, and also. One thing that
Watch your language, please. It's Miller Paving, not the director. You say that director came to council. He did not. He did not say that in a council meeting. That was not said in open session of council. I just want to be clear. Council was never asked for anything specifically. I just want to be clear. That's not part of this discussion. So as of right now, the motion before me is to authorize the clerk and I to execute an agreement with a contract with KPMG based on the report, and that funding for the contract be sourced through the contingency reserve. Councillor Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor. We're talking about, well, the motion that's on the, well, debating whether we're going to go with this firm. And there's been talk of deferring it, not deferring it. But let's say we go down the road of, okay, we're sticking with this motion. We haven't clearly defined if, okay, you say, okay, let's do that. I need it clearly defined. If you're going to interview, I don't know how many employees there are. You said 100, all the council. What are the questions? Are they making up? Like you can't get to the end. We're not even talking about what we're going to be asking.
I don't know if it's in the documents, but would the firm come to council and advise before they start down the road what the plan is?
The answer is absolutely. We can ask them to do whatever you like. If you want to see them here in front of council to outline the methodology, we can do that for sure.
But if it is the council's intent to change the scope of work, I am incredibly uncomfortable being authorized to enter into an agreement with a contract that may change. I don't want to spend $110,000 on $30,000 worth of work is what I'm trying to say at the end of the day. Right. I know. Right. So we have to be, I'm asking council to be considerate of that when we're having this discussion. If it is our intent to change the scope of work, we change the scope of work. Councillor Bateman.
Just to follow up to what I'm saying, like I understand we can't feed them the questions, but we have to tell them what you're looking for them to do, and then they'll formulate the questions around what you want to accomplish from this. If you don't give them what you're trying to accomplish, you could ask any question. What's your favorite color?
I would agree 100%. And I think that's why for 3 times now I've heard what is the end goal? What is it? The deputy mayor very specifically said, what is the end goal here? And we didn't know what the end goal was. So it's difficult for me to imagine a time when we're going to sit down in front of someone and be able to provide that to them, because I don't know that we know what we want at the end of the day. Councillor Anderson.
I'll just be brief. And this touches on what you just said, I think, and Councillor Bateman said, what will the follow-up be to whatever results come from this? What will our responsibility be? Do we have a responsibility, or does it all go to the CEO, which it probably should, because he runs the employee. And then I don't think that's the end of the cost. The cost will be substantial following this, and I feel there'll be a heck of a, I'm going to use the word heck of a follow-up, fallout from this exercise. And we may have seen some of that already. I'm just saying, that's my opinion. I'm not trying to speak on your behalf. And that's where I've seen it before, when you exercise something like this on employees. I took those same seminars that you two did. And I also sat in on one that at the last day, I think it was the CAO. CEO got up and talked about his environment, and wasn't much different than the employee scenario, talking about the pressures and the staffing levels and people leaving and not finding people. And we heard this, we kept hearing this. And I thought, well, give me some answers, give me some answers. They didn't have any answers other than maybe, a couple of items that the mayor touched on, engaging the employees and that type of thing. Something you do more in the private sector than I think you do in the public sector, because everybody's afraid of I'm speaking my own opinion. Everybody's afraid of great integrity commissioners, and where does that all fall into this too? So those are things that are going to will fall into, likely, maybe, in my opinion, if we go ahead with this.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm wondering, we're talking about many different things. We're talking about changing the scope, but I'm curious to know whether the mover and seconder are interested in changing this. Because if not, then there's no sense in us talking about that portion of things, because this is a long conversation. So
What do you want to answer?
No, I'd go to the mover first, Councillor Bateman.
Just one question and one comment. I don't think it's fair that it's used in this room that we say people are already leaving because of this, because then we've already made it clear that none of us see the exit interview. So I don't think there's anybody sitting around this table qualified to say they've left because of this, unless they've seen something we haven't. But we've all received emails that are contrary to that. So I think that is lending to some of the questioning that we're seeing here. Whether there's any validity to what we've received, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we've received them. In terms of what we're debating, whether we're going to defer, what I need to know is if this motion was deferred tonight, that's not killing it. That's deferring it so that the original movers can see whether they want to adjust their original motion on the scope, and then it would be presented back to council in that form, or how does it work?
If we defer this tonight, then this in its entirety, just as you see it on this agenda, comes back to the next available meeting. I would hope it would be the next meeting so we could put this to bed. And we would debate this motion again. And at that point, then the opportunity to change the scope of work would exist, just like it exists right now if we want to.
Thank you. I only asked that because earlier you had mentioned that if they deferred it, it would be up to the CAO to set a meeting with the original two to talk about what scope they saw. So that's where I was going at. So this could be deferred while they did that. And then if they brought them both back, you could still go with the original or what these two came up
That
with.
is correct. Or something in between, if that's what council wanted to do. Councillor Rowley. Deputy Mayor.
So now we're talking about two members of council directing the CAO as to how this is the scope of
No,
work. Is that
no,
what we're talking
No,
about?
we're talking about two members of council sitting down, having a conversation about the scope of work, not providing direction.
So that'll come back to us and we'll decide on
It
it?
would come back to us through council, not through the CAO.
Okay.
So those members of council that sit down with the CAO would have to be prepared to speak to their conversation with the CAO to change that scope of work. That responsibility would not lie with the CAO. He's done his job. Councillor Anderson.
Perhaps that job's not done yet. So you were completing a scope of work. That's
He's still working on an organizational review.
So would it be more prudent to complete that scope? And he has a term of reference to what he's doing. It's already there. Why do we need to?
We've had that discussion,
We've had that
Councillor Anderson.
discussion,
We're
but I still-
we're down a different road now. I think
Then if we're down another road, then we should vote on it tonight.
So if I put a motion to defer on the floor, how debatable or undebatable?
it's not debatable if
So
you
we
get
can-
a seconder.
Second.
So our first motion doesn't go? Oh, yep.
You want to put a timeline? That's May 2nd, is that correct? I am not reading this into the record. I'm asking you if it's okay as the mover, that the organizational review RFP report be deferred to the May 2nd meeting of council. Councillor LeBlanc. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that the organizational review RFP report be deferred to the May 2nd meeting of council. The motion to defer is not debatable. All those in favor?
Can I just ask a question of the CAO? It's not to debate the motion.
Go
I just
ahead.
want clarification. I just think it's important that everybody understand that just if we vote to defer this and you defer it, it still hinges, if I'm not correct, you still have to go back to the HR firm because we can decide anything we want, but they have responded to an RFP. So it really doesn't matter what we say or do, and if they don't agree with it. I think everybody just needs to be clear on that.
They could say not interested, right? Yeah. And then we'd have to reissue an RFP for the new scope of work. So, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. That takes us to notice of motions and motions. The first notice of motion is the one that I have declared a conflict of interest on. Deputy Mayor, I turn the chair over to you to read that into the record.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a 10.1 notice of motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Tadman. Whereas some members of council have requested clarification regarding promotional advertising protocols in terms of contract that has been established with the Beacon magazine. And whereas some members of council have requested clarification on the terms of this contract and have yet to receive a response within the required timeline of 48 hours. And whereas some members of council have noted that these questions respectfully be answered to provide clarification. Therefore, it is requested that the following questions be addressed. The Beacon magazine was brought up as a letter of interest approximately 2 years ago and currently exists as a means of promoting the municipality and certain council members and staff, as well as the overall operation of the municipality. At what point did the letter of interest submitted by the Beacon become a termed contract with costs of the municipality? Was there a tender process provided to other local businesses for this contract? What was the date that council voted to agree that the Beacon become a primary source of promotional advertising for the municipality? And what was the details of this contract? Cost, length of term, etc. What has the cost to date been for this contract with the Beacon? Has there been a discussion regarding a potential conflict of interest or self-promotion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll take the chair for the second notice of motion, which will be moved by Councillor LeBlanc and seconded by Councillor Bateman. Whereas some members of council have noted concerns from residents of the municipality regarding short-term accommodations. And whereas some members of council have noted that these concerns from residents are based upon a lack of awareness of what is occurring in their own neighborhoods regarding short-term accommodations. Now, therefore, it be requested that an amendment be made to the official plan amendment number 8 regarding short-term accommodations. The amendment would include a requirement that neighbors be notified of an application being made to run a business in their neighborhood, a stipulation that the rules and regulations of the business be disclosed to the neighbors, as well as recourse for the residents should there be an infringement, a process in which neighboring properties have the opportunity to provide input regarding issues that may be unique to the application. These amendments would allow for residents to have a greater understanding and awareness of the happenings in their neighborhood, which would contribute to a more positive experience for the business and the residents alike. There would be less uncertainty and more transparency. Though this may be adding a layer to the process, it would contribute to a smoother integration of a commercial operation in the residential area. And further to discuss with council if there have been any cost considerations given to the increased policing requirements for short-term accommodations in the municipality, as there have been impacts to other municipalities regarding increased expenses. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which takes us to bylaws. The bylaw for KPMG will be deferred to the next meeting based on the deferral of the report, which takes us to reports of advisory committees of council, reports, minutes, and council reports. Our first is the Accessibility Advisory Committee. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council received the Accessibility Advisory Committee February 11th, 2022 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. I apologize. I see that Councillor Rowley has left the chambers, but I didn't see what time. Got it noted. Thank you. The second is the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes, moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson. That council received the Heritage Advisory Committee February 14th, 2022 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next is the Community Events Advisory Committee meeting minutes by Councillor Rowley, who is not here. Councillor Anderson, will you move this, please? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. that council receive the March 8th, 2022 Community Events Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the Applefest Advisory Committee meeting minutes moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Tadman, that council received the March 16th, 2022 Applefest Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting minutes moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council received the February 3rd, 2022 Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the DBIA, sorry, that takes us into there we go. Reports and minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. It's the DBIA meeting minutes, and it's moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council received the DBIA February 10th, 2022 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Councillor Rowley returned to the chambers at 9:07 p.m. And takes us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. With the first being a request from the Trent Memorial Hospital Foundation for their gala, moved by Deputy Mayor Connect, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support. I'm assuming it's support since one of the items is circled. Request for sponsorship for the Trent Memorial Hospital Foundation, October 29th, 2022, Halloween Boo Bash virtual gala and dinner, and that council shall sponsor the gala at the level of the bubbling bronze $1,500 sponsorship level. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a piece of correspondence with regard to high-speed traffic on Stevens Street from Jerry Deverell, moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the correspondence from Jerry Deverell concerning high-speed traffic on Stevens Street. Is there any discussion? Councillor Bateman.
Is it possible when we receive these, it wouldn't be from council, obviously, but I don't think there's a lot of residents realize it. I can't remember what meeting, it was 2 or 3 ago, where we talked about a traffic study, municipal wide and south of the tracks. If we can get that out there, because we can't focus on the one-offs, that's why, you know, it was decided to go look at the big picture. And I think some people aren't understanding that that's already underway or going to be.
When we receive correspondence, does the correspondent receive correspondence from us saying we received it, or only if we support it?
They always receive whatever council passes.
Is it? So but in this case, it would just be that we
They
received
received
their
it,
letter.
yeah.
Is there any opportunity for us to include some basic information on council's directions with regard to traffic studies and traffic concerns?
Only if council was to forward it to staff to do so. And that would be would have to be the appropriate staff to do so.
Right.
I was just thinking it might cut down on some of the email traffic because, you know,
So we
received
could-
this letter, but he might still email that we're not doing
We could
anything.
receive the correspondence and direct staff to follow up with the resident with regard to traffic
What's happening?
studies and implementations. And then someone from Public Works theoretically would be in contact with them, right? Councillor Tadman?
I think that is a very good way of dealing with it, because I would be insulted if I went to the problem of sending a letter with my concern and I get a letter back saying, thank you for your letter. Because
And-
that's basically all you get.
That's exactly right. And so if we add that to it, would that be included in the letter? That they then would know someone will follow up with regard
Yep.
to that? Okay. Councillor LeBlanc, would you be okay with that addition as the mover? Councillor Rowley as the seconder? Further, that staff is directed to follow up with the correspondent to identify traffic studies and implementations. Does that work for both of you? Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Any opposed? Go ahead. You always ask a question after I call the
Well,
vote.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm a slow thinker some days. Is that something that should maybe be in as per the communications policy that we just spoke about earlier with Mr. Miller, as far as maybe we need to do that for a lot of these kind of requests or concerns that we get, that it's just, as Councillor Tadman said, not just thank you for your letter, that we just kind of puts.
So
Is that something that would fall under the communications department that we have now?
I would suggest procedurally that if council wants a follow-up like this, then council should add it to the motion rather than making it automatic for every piece of correspondence, because there may not be, we get correspondence that really there's no follow-up for, right? We really do just have to receive it. So I think council needs to be alert to whatever we're passing at council. That's part of the job. Yeah, I think so. Anything further? I'll call the vote again. All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you. Next piece of correspondence is from Stephen Murdoch with regard to Doctor's Day. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, second by Councillor Blanc, that council support. Stephen Murdoch, Vice President, Enterprise Canada, request to proclaim May 1st as Doctor's Day and turn blue. Request for council to participate in lighting up City Hall blue to help make this celebration bigger and better. May I suggest that we light up the community center because it's got a nice white wall, and if we light this place up blue, it really doesn't show. So and as I'm making that quick amendment, Mr. Miller, can you advise if we have a blue light? Yep. Yep.
We have a blue light.
You have a blue light, so we're halfway there. It's just a matter of timing. Are you able to put it on a timer? Okay. So I've changed City Hall to the King Edward Park Community Center. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bateman?
I was just going to add, this is another one of those ones where I think communication to the public, because we have so many of these dedicated months and each color represents a different thing. So I know some people driving by the arena will think it's for
Yes.
autism awareness.
Yes. Or, the coming election. Even. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Hagerman, did you hear those comments around communication with regard to this motion?
Yeah, we'll draw some awareness for sure.
Sorry, did we wake you? Sorry.
No. All good.
Just a joke, Mr. Hagerman. My apologies. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no FYI correspondence, which brings us to question period. Question period is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions about items that appeared on this evening's agenda. Members are asked to state their name for the record before asking a question. A maximum of 5 minutes is set aside for question period. Language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Questions will be received and answered by the mayor or by a member of council or staff if designated by the mayor. Are there any questions from members of the public with regard to an item on tonight's agenda?
Cheryl Langevin. I live at 6 Cove Crescent.
Hi, Cheryl.
This really isn't a question, it's just a statement listening to the motion on staffing issues. I honestly can say that with regards to end of a position of a staff, when they're questioned, many of them will say it's because of family, health, or whatever, when they're really not telling the truth. So I just want you to take that into consideration when you're asking questions of staff who have left for other reasons. They may not always tell you the truth.
Thank you for that. Are there any other members of the public wishing to ask a question? There none noted. Do you have a statement as well?
Yeah, I apologize. There was one announcement that I should have made, and I apologize to the Cotterton Farmer Market for not making it. I just want to let the public aware and for council, that I think the market opens this Sunday. So to the farmers market, I'm sorry I didn't get that at the start, but you're getting it now. So please visit the farmers market this weekend.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that information. Anything further? Actually, no, there's nothing further because we're all the way at the in-camera session. So we will take a 10-minute recess and reconvene at 9:27 p.m. to proceed into closed session.